Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Digital PR Explained. I'm your host, Britt Klontz. Today, I'm joined by Ross Wilkers. Ross is a senior staff writer at Washington Technology, a Gov exec publication that's been around since 1986. And Washington Technology is a news outlet that serves, in case you haven't heard of it, federal market disruptors. It provides news, insights, and data to help them succeed in the federal sector. And Ross covers the business of government contracting with a particular focus on how tech companies are selling to the federal government. So we'll be unpacking a recent story or episode of the podcast he hosts, WT360, that he collaborated with a PR agency on, and what he'll summarize it a bit for us and what stood out about it, and talk a lot about how he likes to work with comms pros behind the scenes. But first and foremost, welcome to the podcast, Ross.
Hello, fellow podcaster. Good to be here.
It's great to be here too. Yes, fellow podcasters unite. I know you mentioned before I pressed record that we're going to get into a little bit of podcasting advice that you might have too, and I know our listeners will love that. But thank you again so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty of the podcast episode that we're going to be focusing on today. Today is May 13th. This is actually an episode that went live on Washington Technology. Again, the podcast name is WT360, and it published yesterday, so it's very fresh. And I'm going to let you summarize it for my listeners, Ross.
Oh,
So go for it. Tell us about the episode itself, a little summary of it. And also, like, more about W360 in general, if that's okay,
yeah,
the
sure.
podcast.
Happy to do that. So, WT360, what do? We focus on themes, trends, and drivers that companies have to have in mind as they navigate trying to secure contract work with the federal government. And during the past 5 months, the new administration came in on January 20th, so it feels like it's changing all the time. You see this policy action item going out and this one going out almost like three in a day. It was like in the especially in the first 2 to 3 months. And one of the big changes that is unfolding in the industry I cover is that how the rules and regulations of how the government buys goods and services from industry are about to become essentially half the size that they are right now, roughly. And I have had an ongoing relationship with this company called Red Team Consulting, and they help other companies and contractors in the market identify business opportunities, um, pursue them, and potentially win them. And they, on their website, they wrote a guide for contractors called The Great Simplification, which is essentially what this regulation rewrite exercise is all about. And yeah, I had a long-standing relationship with them, and so I sent a note to their in-house PR person and said, "Hey, who's behind this? Um, who would want to come on and talk?" And they got back within 30 minutes to an hour and said, "Let's do it." And so got the person, scheduled them. I wanted them within the week because it's a hot topic and it's changing all the time. So I don't want us to be talking about something that's too old. And let's see, we recorded it on Friday and turned it around Monday, yesterday.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And when
And
did
when
you
did you
send that
send that
initial
initial
email
email?
to
I
that? Just to nitpick here.
Yeah, it was within. I want to say it was within 7 to 10 days before
Okay.
we published it.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like, and this is a theme that actually comes up often, just how the responsiveness of the PR people that you're reaching out to goes such a long way. So I love that point that you've shared. And it sounds like you've worked on well, you've worked with them in the past.
Hmm. Yeah, so we have an events itinerary lineup here at Washington Technology as well. And so they have provided their folks as speakers to be subject matter experts as part of panels discussions that
Oh,
we hold
okay.
at these events. And as part of my pitch, when I reach out to folks like that and companies like that that have participated in that, I say, look, this is just like a panel, except you're the only panelist and I'm on here asking the short and sweet question, and you take it in the direction that you think the audience should go in, and I'll follow. And if we go off the rails, that's fine. But as long as we keep moving forward, I'm good.
Yeah. So do you share questions with them in advance if
I
they
share
ask?
I share topics and themes
Okay.
ahead of
That
time.
makes sense. Okay, okay. Very cool. And so you sent that to them. It sounds like, just to reiterate everything, they got back to you within the 8 hours that you sent it, I believe you said, or within at least 24, and agreed to come on the podcast. You set up a time to record on Friday and it went live the following Monday. So, super quick turnaround. Again, you're working with really timely topics. So, that all makes sense. Can we go back? Maybe this isn't a good question actually, but I was going to ask if you can go back to the moment when they first pitched you, but it sounds like this is an opportunity that came from the panel setup. So maybe it's worth asking you, how do people put their name in the hat for those panels? Do you have any
So
pitching advice for that?
the more detailed and specific the biographical information that you give about someone, the better. And if, and it's also a help that in this era where everything seemingly is recorded, right? Industry conferences are recorded, panels are recorded. Just about every law firm, accounting firm in DC has been doing webinars of late as well to try and help companies navigate all that's going on with the administration, right? It helps to have some sound and picture of the person. So I just get a sense of what's important to them and what makes them tick and what do they get really passionate about. And I try to do that with CEO interviews as well when I have the leaders of these companies actually when I'm sitting face to face with them. Because I mean, put yourself in my shoes for a second, right? It's kind of difficult to write about someone and talk to someone in a setting like this if you have no idea of what they sounded like before. It's certainly a big help to have something sourced from somewhere else.
Definitely. Yeah, I know before having you come on this podcast, I had to listen to one of the WT 360 episodes to get a better idea of just your banter and how you carry yourself as well. And just like to get a good idea of your expertise, you mentioned that biographies are important for you. I'm assuming credentials go into that. So, highlighting how long they've been at the position that they're currently in, what exactly do they specialize in, and also you said webinars or anything to showcase how they are on camera is super helpful. Is there anything else that is helpful to you when someone is pitching an expert and sending that information your way? Sounds like that is
Don't
it. Oh,
that's pretty much that pretty much covers it. Um, I would also ask that PR and marketing folks out there, like try to put themselves in our shoes for a moment because, yeah, in addition to being one of the two hosts of the podcast, I do have this other hat that I wear here as a writer, and that
Mm-hmm.
requires popping on breaking news and working on other medium form or longer form articles. So please, 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 folks, don't take it personally if myself or my colleagues did not respond. But I would venture to guess that 60 to 70% of the time, the relevant pitches that would work, the reason why I don't respond to them is because some announcement came out at 4:30 p.m. right as I was about to sign off, and then I had to hop on that and do the day 2 coverage, maybe the day 3 coverage. It can sometimes be a lot to cover the political and business ecosystem here in Washington D.C. And
I can't imagine.
I see you shaking your head and saying like, yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I feel like that is an expectation that PRs in your industry should definitely already have set with themselves and their clients or whoever it is that they're representing or working for. But that's a great point. And I'd imagine, maybe I'm making this up, but I know after interviewing some journalists, you still file that information away. And if the opportunity arises where you can go back to that person and say, hey, like, let's bring you on and have this panel, or hey, you'd be a great fit for this podcast episode where we're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. How do you do that? Am I making that up? Do you organize those incoming pitches in a way so that you can go back and reference them when you need to?
So
Or when
this
the
is
opportunity arises.
well, this is actually coming up tomorrow because we're recording this on a Tuesday, and with tomorrow being Wednesday, I'm doing a introductory call with a defense technology company, right? And there's an understanding of me going into that I'm not going to write anything from that specifically. However, it's just to get to know this industry and get to know just like what you're saying, right? Relationship building and whatnot.
Hmm.
We're happy to take those when when the opportunity arises because it does lay some groundwork for future more well, longer term editorial projects, and we'll consider the podcast as part of that
Yeah.
as well, right? Establishing that dialogue, going in with the understanding that you are there to talk about not just your company, but really the industry and the sector that you participate in, and the way that I frame a lot of those questions in those call introductory get to know you calls. It's probably about 70% about the market and 30% about the company because that's what the audience is really, that's the ratio that they want to see in the final product, right? A little bit about the company and a whole lot about the bigger picture that it resides in.
Yeah. Yeah. So front loading the topics that they can speak to and making sure that they're, of course, timely and framing it in a way that makes sense to the industry and is not a sales pitch goes a long way for you.
That,
And
yes, and what's funny about it is I, once in a while, I'll get a little snarky and sarcastic on my LinkedIn wall, and I'll post YouTube clips of interviews gone bad, and it's mostly from the world of sports talk radio, where athletes will go on as part of some arrangement with their sponsor, right? But they'll go on shows like this, and they'll immediately start talking about the sponsor, right? And one of my favorite ones is this former pitcher from baseball, and he was like, happy to be here, and now I'm here to talk about Qualcomm, and he automatically just starts going to the script, right? Like, you would be amazed at how often that has happened to other reporters in this
I'm
industry.
embarrassed.
And yeah, I mean, look, and to some extent, you can't control it, right? Like if a senior vice president or CEO listens to you and then goes in and turns it into a product pitch, infomercial, right? That happens from time to time, right? Because people have their own ideas. But I mean, you certainly we spoke to a little bit of this before we turn on the recorder, right? You can do your part as much as you can try to do to just say, look, that's not what this is about. Like, yes, you are here to be ambassador for your company and to give a positive image of your company, right? Like, I know that going in as a journalist, and I would be an idiot if I didn't know that that's why they were coming in. But that's also not the entire exercise.
Yeah. I mean, going back to this podcast episode that we talked about in the beginning with Tris Carpenter, who is the general manager for strategic growth at Red Team Consulting. I'm cheating right now and looking at the podcast episode show notes here.
That's
I
not
mean, just
cheating. That's not cheating. We write the notes for a reason.
well, just to bring it back to, I mean, why this one did was so helpful. This person that you worked with, whoever it was, and Tris and the team there. I mean, it's all the whole discussion is centered on this analysis that they wrote that is helping companies do business with the government and is actionable. It's spot on for what you cover at WT360. And can you remind me and my listeners too how you came across this resource in the first place? I think you mentioned it, but I'm blanking. That Tris and the team at Red Team Consulting wrote the seven themes article.
I'm actually connected to him and a lot of his red team colleagues on LinkedIn, and they
Okay.
started sharing it and reposting it. And
Oh.
then, as it becomes word of mouth, other folks that I share connections with across the industry, they were reposting it as well with their own perspective on it. I think I may have actually gotten it on their email distribution as well. But I know just from LinkedIn, right, you can kind of see this wisdom of the crowd developing. And so when you see folks you know and trust in the industry, right, con- weighing in on that feed, that's kind of a tip for me as a journalist who covers that market specifically. Is like, wow, people aren't talking about this, right? And I should know more about this. And as with the conversation that we established, right? I went in, and I think Tris went in as well as this too, with the understanding that there's a lot of change that's coming, right? And so some of the specifics for these changes that we're talking about are happening in live time as we're recording this. However, the reason why it's titled Clear Themes that are emerging is because they are very clear themes, and these are things that companies can actually plan their strategies and visions around, even if they don't know what the sentences are actually going to say. They know what the paragraphs are going to be titled, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad this came up because it speaks to how PRs, it's our job too, to encourage our clients to publish and, take the content that they want to own and take all of this knowledge that they have, put it out there on their own blogs, websites, LinkedIn newsletters. It just goes to show you there's so much value in repurposing the content that you already have too. I mean, they took that, they put it on LinkedIn. I don't know if it was on their blog or their website or what, but I'd imagine it might be on their website. It might also be in a LinkedIn newsletter that their CEO maybe publishes. It's like you just mentioned, it was in an email newsletter. So the value right there is so straightforward and such a great example. I'm thrilled
Yeah.
this came up. And then
Yeah. Can
another
I,
question. Oh yeah.
can I, so I think this is one of the points that maybe we could touch on. I don't mean to hijack your conversation,
No.
by the way, because you're asking for it, but everybody's a content creator. I'm a content
Hmm.
creator. You're a content creator, right? The red team folks are good. Everybody's a content creator. And I think that's good to democratize the information in that way, or democratize the perspective. And that the advantage that, say, let's just focus on that. The advantage that a red team has is they can reach more people inside their own audience sphere. Okay, so they have a they I'm sure they talk about this, internally, right? They have a target audience for their content that they are looking at when they publish this, right? So they have an advantage in that they look at one channel and they can reach more folks in that one channel than I can. The advantage that I have at a news organization and a media company like ours is I can say, okay, like, that's good. But let's take this conversation and have it in a way that channels 2 through 7 of the audience can also
Ah,
follow along, right? That's the advantage that
yeah.
I have working as at a media company is little pockets of audience here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. Let's let's have them be able to follow along the conversation as well. And I don't always get it the best, but I certainly try my best as a journal and a content creator here.
Yeah, translating it for multiple audiences and different types of, um, not customers, but different types of readers, for sure. I mean, and also it's important, I'm sure, for the team at Red Team Consulting to keep that in mind too when they came on the pod to think about the audiences that you're catering to. I'm imagining, I mean, did you share with them audience information? I'm imagining they already were listening to the podcast and understood, but just out of curiosity.
The well, maybe not necessarily numbers, but just like the types of people in the industry, right? And one of
Yeah.
the benefit one of the benefits of working at an industry specific publication outlet and company like ours is in some ways you're talking to your peers as well. So there is that expectation going in that's like, well, wait, like okay, this person that I had a private meeting with to talk about strategy and outlook. Now that conversation in some ways is coming out on the podcast as well. And so now that executive peer they had to meet with, now their peers are listening to this as well.
Right. That makes sense. All right. So I have another question too, and I think this is related to podcasting more so than PRs, but well, actually, you know what? There's a lot of a relationship building component to this too. So when you have someone on WT360, um, what is in a dream world, what do you want them to do after they've gone on the podcast? Do you want them to share it on their LinkedIn's and their social channels as well? I mean, tell us like what you prefer so that my listeners know so that when and if they are ever in the position to work with you, they know exactly what to do next steps to make it set it up as one of the best relationships ever.
Be willing to accept the second invite down the road, especially
Okay.
if you're someone like Tris who works with company and advises companies on that kind of like an impartial or neutral thought leadership thing. Because the way we try to attack the lineup for the podcast is to have a healthy rotation of business leader interviews at companies, and then folks like Tris that work with work with them, right, to kind of give a 50,000 foot view lay of the land, right? So accept the invite, and if you had a good experience, we do send we do encourage you to tell friends and others that work with that if the time comes to be a guest, absolutely say yes to it. Um, I There's a reason why we keep questions short and open ended, and then I jump in with observations, right, and others as you heard. And then yeah, certainly uh, sharing and reposting it does help. We keep an active LinkedIn page at Washington Technology as well. Then we try to have that be where the discussion about the industry happens in real time. And then it also happens on my LinkedIn as well after I repost it. So we won't complain about getting more visibility when our guests share the episode.
I love that. I mean, I haven't had that come up yet. Just the request to accept the second invite in general. And I think a lot of times PRs, unfortunately, um, are told to diversify the podcast that they have their clients or whoever it is that they're representing go on. But I'm a firm believer, like, why not go on the same podcast again? You're only building the relationship, you're building up the authority that you have, you're showcasing that you are the expert on that topic because you're routinely going on a podcast that is the go to source of information in that industry. So I think that's a really solid point.
When you mention, if I can turn the question on you for a
Yeah.
moment, right? So you mentioned that one and done approach. Are you speaking in general, or do you find that to be a theme? Let's call it. Do you find that that happens a lot with industry specific publications like ours, or are you talking like, we'll call it the general and more consumer facing business media, or a mix of both?
I think that's a good distinction. I think it happens. Um, I don't know if you mean, I would say that I see like podcasts diversifying their guests more often on, like you said, the national, more consumer focused podcasts where you're catering to audiences who might just be like, surface level knowledge on a variety of different topics, but in those industry specific podcasts, I've spoken to journalists like Carl Anthony at Automoblog, and I know he is on the same page as you. It's very, industry specific. He is constantly interviewing experts in the automotive industry for podcasts, for articles that he's writing. And he is never opposed to interviewing the same expert as long as they're like knowledgeable on the topic. They're a credible source and he can rely on them. That goes a long way and he'll never, say no. Why? But I know sometimes journalists, I mean, sometimes I think I brought this up because I've had clients in the past who want to diversify the podcast that they go on. And for whatever reason, they're just not interested in going on the same podcast again and again. But that's where, as a PR, that's where my job comes into play to educate my client on the value or the benefit of going on such a podcast multiple times. So that's mainly why I brought that up.
Yeah. If you don't if you don't keep up your efforts to contribute to the conversation in your own industry, someone else is going to fill that gap and take
That's
over
a
it.
solid point.
And then the second part of it, and listen, as far as the consumer, we'll call it the consumer facing business media, that is true, right? They can reach people that I cannot at Washington Technology. There's a fantastic anchor and reporter at CNBC that she covers defense and space. Right? She covers some of the same stuff that we cover here at GovExec. She reaches people, that audience that I can never hope to reach in this role, right? But the advantage that I have is because it's mainly focused around the industry and and you know, the ecosystem, right? I can encourage those companies to just be like, look, no one's opposed to you getting your voice out there to different audiences, but inside, if folks forget who you are inside the industry, inside this ecosystem I cover, the second effort to go outside of that's going to be much harder.
I mean, and another argument there is that you're able to go way deeper into the topic than a journalist at CNBC, and you're giving them actual airtime that's longer than a quick commentary or a quick, quote in an article. It's in this instance a what, 20 to 30-minute long podcast episode that person is getting all of the airtime and all of the opportunity to showcase their expertise and, like I said, just go way deeper into that topic than a journalist at CNBC, for example, might.
And
So
look, she doesn't.
pros and cons.
She does a great job, and this is not
Yeah,
taking a
no,
shot at that,
definitely.
right? It's different roles for different folks and different mandates. I have
Hmm.
a different mandate to cover the business of federal technology than someone, say, at Reuters, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, CNBC. I would have to change my approach fundamentally if I was to go to one of those outlets down the road.
Hmm.
And
That makes sense.
I don't really want to do that right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right. Well, oh gosh, we've gone into so many different directions. I've learned a heck of a lot from this. Before we wrap up, and unfortunately, I could just keep asking you so many questions, but just taking a quick look at the time, somehow it's already 33 minutes in. Don't know how that happened. But before we wrap up, I personally like to end these on a positive note. I am gonna put this back in your court, Ross. Are there any PRs or other companies that you want to give a shout out to that you enjoy working with? And if there is, what is a quick reason why?
I'll give you three,
Oh, I
actually,
love that. Yeah.
that come to mind. Um, and what's cool about this group is they're actually specialists, and we'll call it public sector or federal media. So it's W2 Communications, Sage Communications, America. And so because they focus on federal, on public sector, it's not even just the pitches. Like I can vouch for them as that they do a very good job of educating their clients on what our media outlets are about. And again, right, it's the specialty, right? Having firms that are kind of like a mirror image of Washington technology, except in the public relations field, that are industry specific, market specific, that helps make the conversation a lot easier going in. And I'm sure that every industry has specialist PR folks like that. That automotive journalist you mentioned earlier. I would venture to guess that there are some public relations folks, some of your peers, that just do things in the automotive industry.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah, they always tell us to, I mean, there are lots of PRs like that niche down, and it's a very smart strategy, right? For this exact reason. So, yeah. Okay, great. That's awesome. I'll make sure to let them know that you gave them a shout out and share this episode with them. Ross, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your perspective with us. For anyone who wants to keep up with your work, I know you're on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else that they can find you, or is there anything else that you want to plug to my listeners while I've got you here?
WashingtonTechnology.com is where all our articles and podcasts episodes land, from not just myself, my editor, Nick Wakeman, but a Rolodex of guest contributors as well that submit through pitches. So, guest op-eds do very well from us. So, you know, help us keep that pipeline going. And I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, and I try to go out on the event circuit in DC to be seen and exchange business cards. Some of us still do the physical business cards in 2025, believe it or not.
I know, right? Actually, it can be really fun. So I'm right with you there. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ross.
Great questions, and this was fun.